The familiar hum of my police cruiser was a comforting backdrop to the sleepy suburban streets of Maplewood. Over a decade on the job had introduced me to all sorts of characters, but most days remained pleasantly mundane. One chilly autumn morning, a black sedan sped past the school zone, way over the speed limit. I switched on my siren, pulling the gentleman over. But as I approached, I noted the driver's intense gaze and tight grip on the wheel as well. "License and registration, please," I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. He handed over his documents without breaking eye contact. His name was Evan B. After giving him a ticket for speeding, he leaned close, his voice a low threat. "You'll regret this." Trying not to show my unease, I shot back. "Drive safely, Mr. Brooks." Days turned to weeks, and I couldn't shake off the feeling I was being watched. That same black sedan started appearing everywhere, near my house, my daughter Isabel's school, and even by my regular coffee haunts. Listening to my instincts, I delved into Evan's background, and what I found was chilling. A history stained with obsession, stalking, and a trail of terrified victims. One evening, as I was setting the table for dinner, Isabel, my bright-eyed 7-year-old, mentioned a new, quote, friend, unquote, she met at the park. A man who claimed to know her mom quite well. My heart sank as she described Evan. Panicking, I reached out to my precinct. We needed protection, and fast, but Evan's tactics grew more sinister. Notes started appearing in our mailbox, each message more disturbing than the last. Lucas Martinez, a detective and a close friend from the precinct, made a breakthrough. Evan's younger sister had been killed in a hit and run years ago, with an off-duty cop being the main suspect. It became clear Evan's vendetta was not just against me, but against the uniform I wore. I then made a bold decision to confront Evan directly, with backup surrounding us, of course. As we sat across from each other in that dim room, the weight of our shared pain filled the air. I tried to convey genuine empathy for his loss, explaining not all of us here were the enemy. The hours we spent talking felt like mere minutes, that by the end we both had tears in both of our eyes. Evan was taken into custody, but not before I made a promise to help seek justice for his sister's death. The aftermath left me shaken. I needed a break, not just for me, but for my daughter Isabel too. The experience was a stark reminder of how a routine decision could spiral into life-altering consequences. In my 15 years on the force, there was one case that haunted me: the disappearance of Emily Collins. I remember the night she was reported missing, the chill in the air, and the tightness in my chest. She was just 7 years old. Years went by, and the leads dried up, but the weight of that unresolved case hung heavy. The little girl with the bright blue eyes and golden curls never truly left my thoughts. When I received the first anonymous letter on the eve of the 10th anniversary of her disappearance, my heart raced. Written in shaky, almost manic handwriting, the note simply read, "You should have found her." I took it to my superior, but without any tangible leads or threats, there wasn't much we could do. However, the letters didn't stop. They grew more frequent and more sinister, detailing places I'd searched and clues I'd missed. Each envelope contained a small trinket, a child's toy, or a hair ribbon, all eerily reminiscent of Emily's belongings. I decided to reopen the case unofficially, reviewing the old evidence and revisiting all past leads. One night, as I was poring over the case files at home, a faint sound echoed through the stillness. A child's giggle, playful yet chilling, seemed to come from just outside the window. Rushing to the window, I found nothing but the quiet, empty street. I tried to dismiss it as exhaustion playing tricks on me, but the eerie feeling lingered. Sleep became elusive as the days went on. I'd hear the soft pattering of tiny feet running down the hallway, or a whispered lullaby in the middle of the night. The presence felt curious, sad, and sometimes angry. Desperate for answers, I sought the help of a local medium named Clara. Skeptical but desperate, I invited her to my home. As she entered, her face turned pale and she hesitated, as if debating whether to proceed. The seance began and Clara's voice grew distant, her breathing shallow. Suddenly, she began speaking in a voice that was not hers, a voice that sounded hauntingly familiar. "Why didn't you find me?" she whispered, her tone filled with pain and accusation. The atmosphere in the room grew dense, the weight of guilt and sorrow pressing down on me. "I tried, Emily," I whispered back, tears streaming down my face. "I'm still trying." Clara, or Emily through Clara, began recounting details of the night she disappeared, details only the true culprit would know. The description led to a small, abandoned cabin deep in the woods, a place previously overlooked in our search. As the connection broke and Clara came back to herself, she looked shaken and drained. We immediately informed the police, and by dawn, a search party was on its way to the cabin. What we found there was a heartbreaking mix of release and horror. Emily's remains, her tiny shoes, and her favorite teddy bear were all there. Evidence of the tragedy that had unfolded a decade ago. The case was reopened, and with the new evidence and a fresh set of eyes, it didn't take long to track down the culprit. It was someone from our town, someone who's been hiding in plain sight. Justice was finally served, but the weight of the unresolved case was replaced by the weight of regret. If only we'd searched a little further, looked a little harder, perhaps Emily's fate could have been different. I moved out of my old home, unable to bear the memories it held. The new place was quiet, a chance for a fresh start. But every year, on the anniversary, the day Emily was found, a single letter arrives at my doorstep, with the same shaky handwriting and a simple haunting message, quote, "Remember me," unquote. And I always will. The woods had always been my escape. When things got tough at home or school became unbearable, I'd take the old Chevy my dad handed down to me and just drive. At 17, I felt invincible behind that wheel. The world spread out in front of me like an open book waiting to be read. One evening, after a particularly bad argument with my mother, I found myself speeding down the familiar winding roads of our local forest. The thick canopy above created pockets of darkness that the headlights barely penetrated. There was something eerily calm about the woods at night, a stillness that both soothed and unnerved me. I was lost in my thoughts, pushing the Chevy harder, the engine growling in response, when a flash of blue and red lights in my rear view mirror snapped me back to reality. My heart sank. A speeding ticket was the last thing I needed. Pulling over, I took deep breaths, hoping the officer would let me off with a warning. I'd heard tales of the officers patrolling these woods, some kind-hearted, others not too much. I glanced in my side mirror and saw the officer step out of his cruiser, illuminated by his vehicle's headlights. He was tall, shadowy, and moved with a deliberate slowness. I rolled down my window as he approached. "Evening, ma'am. Do you know why I pulled you over?" "Speeding, I guess," I replied sheepishly, my voice barely above a whisper. He shone his flashlight into the car, scanning the interior briefly before resting the light on my face. The bright beam made me squint. "Driving a bit fast for these woods, aren't you?" His voice was flat and motionless. Before I could reply, a chilling scream echoed through the forest, making the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. The officer's posture stiffened and he swiftly turned his flashlight toward the woods, searching for the source of the sound. "What was that?" I whispered, my heart pounding in my chest. The officer did not answer. Instead, he moved closer to the edge of the road, his flashlight darting between the trees. From the darkness, a figure emerged, staggering with an uneven gait. It wasn't human, at least not anymore. Its skin was pallid and hung loosely from its frame. Eyes clouded over, mouth agape, revealing broken, jagged teeth. Without warning, the creature lunged at the officer, who barely had time to draw his gun. I screamed, fumbling to lock the car doors. The officer and the creature grappled on the ground, the flashlight rolling away and casting eerie shadows across the scene. With adrenaline coursing through my veins, I started the car and slammed on the gas pedal. Swerving around, the two figures locked in combat. The last thing I saw in my rearview mirror was the creature standing up, the officer nowhere in sight. The woods had never seemed so ominous. Every rustle of the leaves, every snapping twig made me jump. Tears streamed down my face as I sped through the forest, praying I'd find my way out. After what felt like hours, the trees finally began to thin out, and I emerged onto the main road. The familiar lights of my town in the distance. I pulled over, my hands shaking on the steering wheel, and took a moment to collect myself. I had to report what had happened. I dialed 911, my voice trembling as I recounted the events. The operator assured me that they'd send someone to investigate immediately. When I finally reached home, my mom was waiting for me, worry evident on her face. We hugged tightly, both grateful for the safety of our home. The next day, news spread through the town about the missing officer and the strange events in the woods. Some believed my story, while others dismissed it as the wild imaginings of a traumatized teen. The forest was searched extensively, but no trace of the officer or the creature was ever found. The woods, once my refuge, now became a place of nightmares. Details of what lurked within took on a life of their own. Some said the creature was a lost soul, others claimed it was a result of a secret government experiment gone awry. But no one really knew. All I knew was I'd never drive through those woods again. The memory of that night, the officer's terrified face, and the grotesque creature haunted my dreams for years to come. It was a grim reminder that the real monsters
are the ones we found.